There we go. All right. I have like a bunch of stuff open, so let's see. All right. You see my slides?
Yep.
All right. So I gave this talk last year. It hasn't really changed much because interviewing hasn't really changed much, but this is a great time to revisit this stuff because it's coming around that time where you're starting to apply for sub internships and rotations. And yeah, I want you guys to make it this time. Are we able to have people, like, if they want to ask a question, like, can they ask and then hop on and use their voice and camera and stuff?
Yeah, I can, if they ask a question, I can give them the ability to talk. They just have to like raise their hand or something.
Awesome. All right. So I want this to be a dialogue, a discussion. Whenever I was going through, we had things like white coat coaching, which was a great resource because there wasn't a lot of information at the time about where to rotate at and who was taking DOs and who wasn't, what programs were going to shut down. And, a lot of that's changed now. And there's a lot of resources. You have SAOAO that's been more organized. And so I want to utilize this time to make it all about you and the questions that you have. There's no judgment. Everybody probably has the same questions. So I want everybody to ask whatever you have and we can answer it here. I have a lot of time. So let's respect each other's time and let's get some answers here, okay? And going forward, let's think about some other topics you guys want to talk about. It doesn't have to be about orthopedics, it can be about anything. And we can just collaborate on that. Just send it to SAOAO and we'll start creating topics. If you guys want to talk about orthopedic topics, perfect. We can do that too. I have plenty of lectures. So whatever you guys want to do, I want to tailor this to make it about you guys. All right. So let's get started. So first, my disclosure is I am a Grandview, now Kettering Health physician and resident. So I do have my bias. I think my residency is the best program, obviously, but I think the best residency program is the one you get into because residency is very much what you make it. Here are some link trees for you to go to. This one right here, the tiny URL, this will have like a collection of documents, including this presentation, my CV, my ERAS application whenever I applied. I have some good examples of ERAS from other residents, as well as a document that I used for fellowship that has a bunch of questions, like sample questions that I asked interviewees. And we'll get into like what kind of questions to ask and being engaged in an interview and things like that. So that's that. And then of course my link tree has a bunch of information about residency, my social media page. You can get to all the other social media pages, and so you can always visit that too. I will say Dr. Emily Tan, one of our former residents, she reached out to me because she heard that we were having one of these. So she wants to offer her services, 25% off to two people, first people to basically sign up. It's a personal statement and CV prep and kind of coaching for the interview process. So that's available. You can visit her website under courses, and the promo code will be at the end. So I'll just give it to you guys so it gets you guys to stick with the whole time. So, all right. So the objectives for this lecture is going to be the preparation of this time. This is where you guys are at. We're at the beginning. How do we get to the end? Matching. Okay. So we'll talk about rotations, the application itself, and then ultimately the interview. The rotations, I always talk about it whenever students come in as more of like a dating process. This is like a blind date. We're getting to know each other for the first time. And as you guys know, there's no more scores anymore. So there's no more way to differentiate you guys other than your CV. A lot of the schools are going to pass fail. Comlex and USMLE are going pass fail. And so there's just not a lot of, you guys all have always been really good on paper. And, if I always say that if I would be coming in as a resident or as an applicant, just like you at this time, I probably wouldn't get into residency because you guys' applications are so impressive now. And so we'll talk about the application itself, how to make it look really, really good. I have a couple CV options. Again, at that link tree that I gave you, I got that off of Reddit. I've used it for years. I think it's worked great for me. And so I would highly suggest something in that format, something simple, easy to read, and doesn't have a bunch of fluff. Like having the longest CV isn't the best thing. You want something that people can like distinguish and like see you have done these things. Putting on there that you volunteered for a day at the soup kitchen for 30 minutes is probably not the best thing to throw in your application. Just things about longevity, and you'll see that in the CV. Then we'll talk about the interview process. Once you've rotated and you've done the application, at that point, and once you get an interview, everybody's on the same page. We personally at our program, we strip away everything else, and we just want to talk to you, the individual, and we want to see if this is going to be a fit, because it's going to be a 5-year marriage for orthopedic residency. And so I want to know things like, what's your backup plan? Why you're doing this? I'm going to ask you the hard questions, and you having a good answer to that, it shows me that you prepared for that. So that's the important stuff. And then we'll just talk about matching. Obviously it's very exciting when you match, and then we'll talk about what happens if you don't match, because that's a very, very realistic possibility. And I want you, I'm not going to hide that from you guys. I want you to be realistic with yourselves. I've had people with the highest scores, the best applications, not get into to residency, to orthopedic residency. And so what's your backup plan? And I'll give you some options and kind of my opinion on kind of where to go from there. All right, so for every slide, I've kind of put a book that I think is like outstanding, and things that I've read and that have kind of helped me get through the residency that are not orthopedic related. This one by Malcolm Gladwell is great, called Outliers. If you haven't read it, I'd highly suggest it on audiobook. So again, I want you to think about why you're doing orthopedic residency. If it's because you want to supplement, you want to have a great profession that has a very high income, probably not the best field for you. This road is a very long road. It's tedious. It's a lot of sacrifice. I've sacrificed a lot of time with my family. I've sacrificed income. I've sacrificed, time, being in orthopedic residency. But to me, it's been all worth it because of what drives me every day. So you got to answer the why. Then you got to look at things like your core values. There's certain things that have been described that describe satisfying work. One of them is autonomy, complexity, clear relationship, and effort and reward. You'll see that a lot in these leadership books, and how someone can have a career and something that they enjoy, and things like money and prestige don't really matter when it comes to autonomy, complexity, and the relationship between effort and reward is really what drives people to do really, really good work. And so I would really, really strongly suggest that you really take a inward look at yourself, self-reflection, and what your core values are and why you're wanting to pursue orthopedics. And then once you've kind of settled those things in, find the people around you. That Maddie, you and I talked, the other day about a letter of recommendation. You going out and introducing yourself to the local orthopedic surgeon, it's the best thing you can do. It's practice. You have to practice meeting people. Be a person. Get on the phone, bother people, figure out what works. And that is what's going to get you a residency spot, because you're going to do that every day in every patient encounter that you have. You're going to walk into a room with someone that has a disability and they don't know where else to go. So you being able to be calm, collected, and have confidence is all it's going to take to make a really good orthopedic surgeon. And so being able to go out in the community, find an orthopedic surgeon, that whether or not they're part of your program, whether or not they're going to write you a letter of recommendation, it's great experience for you just on meeting new people and figuring out who's around you. So when it comes to finding a program, you got to be strategic. All right. I don't have a lot of suggestions here, but there's a lot of resources for you. There are MD and DO sites. I can tell you right now, if you're an osteopathic student, there's just a lot of allopathic programs are not even going to look at you. Okay. But that's changing. And my hope is going to continue to change, and we'll continue to have more osteopathic and allopathic programs, and that line just completely fades away with time. But as of right now, that's the line that's drawn right now. And we have more allopaths applying to osteopathic programs now. And so you just have to be strategic on where you're applying to. And again, you can apply to every program that you can apply to every single one. It's expensive, but if that's what you want to do, it's absolutely a strategy. But I would suggest being strategic. Things like geographic location. Where were you born? Where's your family from? Are you East Coast, West Coast, Midwest person? It helps you in the application process and the interview process to tie a reason of why that program. Because when we are trying to pick an applicant, we are trying to look at someone that has the same values and the same kind of thought process on why they're trying to be at this program specifically. And that's how specific we're trying to get. And then look at things like alumni. I went to Des Moines University, and I have students text and call me all the time because I'm on the alumni board, and they'll reach out to me and be like, hey, can I talk to you about orthopedic residency, or can I talk to you about your program? So don't be afraid to ask your administration for alumni that are an orthopedic surgeon, and you can see where they went to residency and then ask them about their program. Now, I would suggest probably not reaching out to the person that's been in practice for 20 years, because they're going to be like, no help to you in residency. Okay. They've been so far gone. But the person that's, either in residency currently or maybe 2 or 3 years out, it's a perfect opportunity again for you to meet new people and plug yourself into the community. Look at your school and state restrictions. Whenever I was at DMU, we were able to take 5 orthopedic rotations, or any specialty you wanted, but it was 5 at the time. And then I had to kind of finagle some things. I told them that, like, oh, this is not a 6 rotation orthopedic, this is sports medicine. You gotta do what's best for you. And so you have to look at what your restrictions are. I have some students that say, hey, I only get 1 elective rotation. So if that's what it is, then you have to be even more strategic of the program that you rotate at, because that's probably the program that's going to be your highest chance of getting in. And if that's your case, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my number and my email. We can always talk about strategy. I'm happy to help. But you got to do what's best for you, and just that's the first question you got to ask, because that's going to really, really limit you on kind of how to best position yourself for the best chance of getting into residency. Then we had COVID. A lot of programs are just now opening up again, taking rotators. Some are still doing virtual interviews. We did our first in-person interviews this year. So that's currently being opened up. Some are only taking people from certain regions. So that's always a question just to ask. Are you accepting applicants from, if you're a West Coaster, then, are they going to take you down in Florida? So just ask those questions. And then always keep the application in mind as you're kind of going through this whole thing, of how you're going to build your experience, how you're going to build your portfolio in the long run. You've gotten all the way up to this point, so how do you structure that in your CV? And hopefully you can see that in my CV, how I've done that. And then again, timing is everything. So whenever I did my rotations, for me, I was being strategic because I wanted the opportunity to visit the United States. That was my strategy. So what I did was I was doing my clinical rotations in San Antonio, and I was already rotating with an orthopedic surgeon that I went out into the community, met him in the hospital. I just walked straight into his OR and I introduced myself. And from there, I wanted to take a whole tour around the United States. I didn't have the money to fly to every place, so I drove in my little Honda Fit, and I went from Texas to New Jersey to Ohio to Chicago, back to Ohio, all the way to Corvallis, and then all the way back down through California, back down to Texas. So that was just my plan, because I just wanted to see the United States. You don't have to do that, obviously, but figure out how are you going to get yourself through the months, because it is a grueling process. If you ask the students that were ahead of you, they're going to be like, oh man, that was having to wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. Residents don't even look at you. They don't even want you to be in the room. You keep asking, you want to be helpful, but you feel like you're just being annoying, and you're just having to be on the entire time. It's a long, long time to be dedicated to trying to get a position. You just have to figure out what's going to get you through. And for me, it was like, oh, I can't wait to get to Corvallis. I can't wait to go see Chicago again. You know, that's what got me through. Or I can't wait to drive through the Rocky Mountains. It's going to be amazing. So you got to figure out what's going to be your plug and what's going to keep you going. So set up a game plan. Obstacle is the way. Great book by Ryan Holiday talking about obstacles and what can get you through. This is a really good book. Highly recommend. So again, just what are the logistics of the program? First thing you should do is just send emails out to program coordinators. Be super polite. These are the face of the program. If you are bugging a coordinator, if you are being rude and you are like being demanding, remember, think about a text message that you got from a friend and you're like questioning, you're like, was he or she like mad at me? You know, think about that, how things come off in an email. Sometimes you may catch a coordinator off on a bad day and you just come off like really demanding. It sucks, but that's just the reality of it. And that gets back to us, you know, oh, I didn't like that student. They were being really demanding about their needs in the program and things like that. Remember, just be patient. Everybody's looked at, and it's a lot of applications going through. So be polite to your coordinators. Then get organized. Get professional headshots. Please do not take a picture off the internet. Take a picture with, I mean, a lot of cell phones have gotten a lot better than whenever I was applying, but get a professional headshot done. Wear professional attire behind a neutral background and get those put in your application. Sometimes the schools will do them for you, which is great. I think I spent, I want to say like $150 on my headshots. And I use those today. It's on my profile right now. I use those as part of like, I saw it as an investment in my future. And even today, it's 5 years later, I'm still using the same headshots when I'm applying for jobs. So just keep that in mind. It's a really good investment. Again, we already talked about your CV. Please see mine. Immunizations, this is huge. You cannot go onto rotations if your TB and things like that. It's like super annoying stuff. But you need to figure out what each rotation needs. So I'll show you how I set up mine. I'll share my screen for my application doc, but you want to make this super organized. You want to make it very easy for the coordinators to just click a link and there's your immunization records. It's not written with a bunch of like confusing. It's just very clean, and it just makes the process so much easier. Driver's license, social security card, background checks. Make sure you have your EMR training. I remember whenever I was coming through, I had to have Epic training, so I actually had to fly to Dayton before I actually got to Dayton. It's really annoying. We've gotten rid of that process. But yeah, you have to do EMR training at some of these sites. And then your personal statement. Maybe I may throw I'll probably throw if I can find it, my personal statement for residency. And if you copy it, we'll know, because I'll read it. But your personal statement doesn't have to be this dissertation on, why you want to be an orthopedic surgeon and the sport that you played and it's kind of changed your whole life. I personally don't. You got to think, if we get 600 applications, how many personal statements am I reading? If I look at an application, I can easily read through a personal statement. It makes that more appealing to me. I'm not saying to write a 3-sentence personal statement, but I'm saying just get to the point. You don't need, whenever you're in this stage of your career, you think that longer is better. You want to make things look like you put a lot of work into them, and actually it looks worse. It kind of looks like babbling. It looks like you're trying to convince yourself that of what you're trying to do. So get to the point. You should have so many drafts. You send this to everybody in your family, and you let them just mark this thing up and tell you how stupid it is, how corny it is, and you let them mark it up. Or go to White Coat Coaching and let them mark it up and tell you how stupid it is. It's a really good way to get really good feedback, and it's something that's really important, because other than letters of recommendation and your CV, the only other thing that we have now is your personal statement to go off of. And so we want good foundation on why we're picking you as a resident. We used to say COMLEX and USMLE, please, you know, I know it's pass fail. If you get a fail, I mean, you're leaving yourself with a very, very short string, you know, for you to get into residency. So if you get a fail, it's not the end of the road for you. But I mean, you'd have to have something very, very appealing on your application, or a contact in the community that's connected to a program, you know, something like that. It's not the end of the road for you, but I would say do not leave it up to chance. Make sure you're studying for these exams, pass the exam, and then your transcripts, obviously, and then your letter of good standing and your letters of recommendation. I know I know we have I don't know how much time we have with you guys, but if you need me to speed up, you just tell me. So as far as letters of recommendation, I personally had a recommendation from a family physician, an OBGYN, and a general surgeon. These are the people that knew me the best. It wasn't an orthopedic surgeon, because at my program at DMU at the time, there was no orthopedic surgeons there. And the letters of recommendation that I got was the one guy that I did get another one from the guy I walked into his OR, but it was kind of impersonal. You know, I only knew him for, you know, like a month. And yeah, I really didn't have a close connection, but these other people I knew for years, and they worked with me. And, you know, these are the people that can really, really speak to your application. And I'm not saying don't try to make yourself stand out, but have someone that can really speak to your character, your culture, and like what you're all about, and can really, really put a good letter of reference down. We can all tell whenever it's just a template, trust me. But these letters of recommendation are becoming more and more important, especially if you have a letter of recommendation from someone that's from that program. That's even more important, because we will trust what they say, because we train them. So find those connections if you can in the community, because that's also a big plus. We talked about choosing your sites. When you're choosing a site, I would highly suggest that you look at things like ACGME accreditation, how long they've been around, you know, their geographic location. Is it even in a place that you want to be at? If you're down from the south, maybe you don't want to be in the cold. You know, that truly is a thing. And you know, the length of the rotation that you're going to have, is it 2 weeks, 4 weeks? You know, how's that play into how many sites you're allowed to have? Do you know any alumni in the area? When is their interview dates? What fellowships do people go to, if they go to any? Does everybody do a fellowship? You know, that's a really good question. You know, as osteopaths, I think we make great community orthopedic surgeons without fellowships. You know, I'm personally doing a spine fellowship, but that's because I wanted to learn more about spine. I could 100% leave my fellowship as an exceptional general orthopedic surgeon. So you have to ask yourself what you think you want to do. What's your research requirement at that program? The type of rotation that you're going to have there, is it more observational, where you're sitting in the back of a room with 10 people and you kind of blend in, or is this more of like a personal, intimate experience? I think that also speaks to the program. And then communication with the program, like we talked about with the coordinators, being early, precise, concise. This is your first impression to the program, so doing that is huge. And here, I'll just show my screen for a second on how I did everything. Mine's kind of, just go to my drive here. So whenever I applied to residency, I had an application docs folder on Google Drive. And what I would do is I would send this to program coordinators when they would be like, hey, can you send me your immunizations? Can you send me your insurance? Can you send me your COMLEX pass fail? Can you send me your headshot, letters of rec? Whenever they asked for all this stuff, all I would do is send them this link, and it had everything perfectly laid out for them. They can just download it immediately. and they love. I got so much good feedback from this. Instead of sending multiple emails, oh, here's my immunization, oh, here's my background check and my drug testing, and it all gets kind of lost. It's just right here in one simple link, and they can get it all in one place. I got a lot of great feedback from this, so I would highly suggest us setting something up like this. And it just makes their life a lot easier. And again, you're going back to that being concise, and it just shows more being more professional. So let me get this going again. We'll skip the COVID-19 stuff, and we personally have kind of gone away from all restrictions, other than masks at some facilities, but this can still be a thing in certain areas. So again, I would just ask the question to your coordinators. All right, this is an investment in your life and your professional career. I'm not telling you to be scared of it, but it is a financial burden. You are going to have to fly places, Airbnb, hotels, rotating room are great, resources, but it's very expensive. I mean, I'm talking 10, 15 grand more depending on where you go and how long you're there for. So that's a lot of money. And you have to think about where you're going to get that money from. If you have family that can provide it, even better, because that's no interest. You already have a lot of student debt that you've committed to. So now you have to think about how you're going to pay this investment off. And I did mine through a loan. I went through things like Laurel Road that have specific medical student loans. And they're low interest rate loans, but it's something that no one really talks about to you. You just start doing it, and then suddenly you start seeing the bills start adding up. And the last thing you want to do is start putting the stuff on credit cards. And now you have a 25% interest rate on a credit card. And now you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay that off, when all you're doing is you're paying debt with debt, and you don't want to do that. White Coat Coaching by James Dow. They have a new version, actually. It's really good. Highly suggest that every one of you who are physicians, whether you go into orthopedics or not, should read this book. It's gospel. There are application fees, like we talked about. So the more places you apply to, the more expensive it is. So I would always suggest on trying to be as frugal as you can, figure out where you want to apply to. And it's something we ask in the interview. We ask you, where are you applying to? If you say I applied everywhere, well, that's not very impressive. But someone that is very intentional, that's something I focus on. That's interesting. They put a lot of thought on where they're applying to. Not saying it's that we don't not take anybody that's applied everywhere, but it's just something to talk about. Transportation, again, mine is it looks like my words underneath mine didn't come out. Might have been another presentation, but for transportation, mine was car. I knew I could not afford flights everywhere, and then I couldn't afford a rental car. I've had a couple students who've come to rotation, and then they asked me about the bus schedule and whether or not they should get a bike. And I'm like, man, I would highly suggest that you get a rental car, because you never know when you're going to be called in, and you trying to catch a bus and then use a bike may not be the best means of showing your best foot forward whenever you're trying to sorry, one second, lost me there. So trying to show your best foot forward whenever you're trying to get to like a call, whenever you're taking call with a resident or something like that. Housing, I used rotating room a lot. I didn't use Airbnb because Airbnb is really expensive. I would avoid hotels. They're very, very expensive. You can message the coordinators, and they'll give you some options. I know that we have like a resident housing list that you can pick from, and they're usually a lot cheaper than everything else. But not all programs have this. So I would really reach out to the coordinators first, and then look at things like rotating room. So yeah, and then food. It's obviously really expensive. What I did was I would go to Costco, and I would get the $4 chickens, and I would take a big bag of salad mix, and I would just put them in a bag, put it in the refrigerator, and that's all I was eating. And then I would eat at the hospital, because if you go out to eat every night, it's gonna be really hard. If you try to make food at wherever you're staying, It can be really tedious. And, you know, if you're staying with a resident is another thing. There's a whole like, you know, dynamic to it. If you're taking up all the available fridge space at a resident's house, probably not going to go over really well with them. While they're going to say things about you like, oh my gosh, that person was so annoying. They took up my whole fridge. They used every pot and pan in the house. Again, it's the nature of the beast, but you just have to be mindful of these things. It is an impression that you leave when you stay with a resident, but it is also a great resource because they can tell you about things that are happening that as a resident, you know, I'm so busy, I'm texting attendings, I'm texting other residents, I'm texting staff. And then when things come up, the last person I think about is the student. And, you know, if you're staying at someone's house, you learn about maybe some labs that are going on in the area. Maybe we're all getting together and going to dinner, and that's just a chance for you to meet us. And so it definitely is a positive, but you do have to watch yourself a little bit, and the way that you hold yourself in that person's house. Just be respectful and a person, and you'll be fine. All right, so the rotation itself. I have the book by Joshua Medcalf, Chop Wood, Carry Water, because that's what it feels like when you're doing this. It feels like mindless tasks that you're doing every single day, and you just have to remind yourself that you're just chopping wood and carrying water so that you can get to the goal. You have to fall in love with the process. This is the process that is set before you. If you are frustrated with the process, then maybe it's not right for you. Or if you are, then what's your outlet? How do you? For me, it was going to the gym. You know, it's okay to be frustrated, and so you just have to really reel yourself in and figure out, again, why are you doing this? Why are you subjecting yourself to this painful process? So just think about that. So you have to remember that, like, whenever you get to a rotation, you have to calibrate yourself. You don't want to, if you have 4 weeks there, you have 4 weeks to make the best impression possible. The last thing you want to do is take 4 weeks to get used to the whole process there. You have a limited amount of time to learn the EMR, where things are, where the patient rooms are, where the offices are, where the surgery is, where the scrubs are at, where the lunchroom is, which is the most important thing, and then where the ortho room is, where the residents stay. All these things, you have to calibrate yourself to that stuff very, very quickly, because you don't want to look like the person that's lagging behind, or always having to, I always had to tell that student where something was. It was so annoying. I told them what floor the patients were on, and they kept asking me every morning, what floor was it again? You know, you just have to be efficient and think about that process and just be engaged the whole time. And then self-awareness. This is something that's really big for me, and I know for a lot of others. You have to think about how you present yourself in the, you know, at all times. Just always checking in with yourself on how things are going. I'm not telling yourself to be paranoid, but I'm telling you to just remember that how you present yourself to attendings and to the staff, most importantly, is very reflective of the person that you are. So if you are super polite and super professional to the attending, but to the staff, you're rude, you're opening up gloves on the back table without asking, not introducing yourself, only to the attending you say hi. These are things that people recognize. Trust me. Our program has a group of staff that are like family, and we hold our residents and students to a higher accord, and they want to protect this because they have to spend 5 years with you. So the last thing they want to do is have an asshole on service for 5 years that they have to deal with. So they're going to protect this thing. So they're going to figure out, they're not going to introduce yourself. You have to prove yourself to them. The attendings, they are so plugged into the day on trying to finish their day. They're going to ask the staff at the end of the day, what do you think of that student? You know, so be super, super polite to your staff. Introduce yourself, be a person, ask them about their day. You know, it shows engagement. Don't be fake about it. Like, actually, if that's how you're going to enjoy the process of chopping wood and carrying water when you're there, you're being engaged and you're loving what you're doing every day. It's what gets you up in the morning, is to meet these people, because they're really great and they have a lot to teach you as well. I have one of our scrubs, Nick, he will classically tell me, Brian, you're being an ass. Let the student close. And I'm like, sorry, I'm just like trying to finish the case. He's like, no, get out. I'll teach the student how to close. And I notice he only does it for the students he likes. And so he is very protective of that process. And so, trust me, it'll pay back dividends in the long run. And don't be afraid to get feedback from people. I'm not saying like every week always go up to a resident like, how do you think I was doing? Do you think I need to change anything? Like I'm just saying like, ask people, what can I do better? Is there anything that you think that if something goes wrong in a rotation, and something inevitably will. I remember I was on a spine rotation, and I was pulling a drain on a patient on the floor because one of the other residents asked me to. And when I pulled the drain, I noticed that it was really, really hard to pull out. And then when it finally came out, I looked at the end of it and it didn't look torn, but I had something in my gut just didn't feel right, but I didn't tell anybody. And then that patient ended up having their subsequent procedure on the spine day. And they opened them up, they found a little piece of tube sitting inside of them. And so when I heard about this, I immediately went to the attending and told them what happened. And I said, how could I have done this better? Because I don't want patient care to ever come in between making myself look good and their care. So what can I have done better? And we sat there and I got that feedback from them. And that shows that you're a human being and you're willing to put yourself on the line for patients. And that's more important than anything. So getting feedback is really important too. So this is just the ERAS application. I don't know if it looks like this now. I'm sure it's changed a lot, but this is what it looks like. This is what you guys applied to. I would highly recommend signing up for an account as soon as it opens. I know that they give you like a date that you can start uploading stuff, and then there's like a date to submit stuff. I would not wait till the last minute to submit or to start uploading. It's just like any type of work that you do. The little bit of like adding to it a little bit at a time just really pays off. Like right now, when I was applying to fellowship, I would just slowly add, my CV, then my headshots, then I would add a personal statement the next day. And I just gave myself tasks every day. I utilize my iPhone Siri reminder like crazy. It has like 150 like reminders. And I would just set myself like, remind me at 9 a.m. tomorrow to go over my personal statement again. And then I would just diligently add to that process so it wasn't so overwhelming and I wasn't like always so fixated on the actual submission date. And I gave myself realistic goals. All right. Then there's the interview, the dreaded interview. Verbal judo is great. You have to remember the things that you say, and the way that you say them is can be taken in different ways. It's a great book to kind of reel you in as a person and show you that maybe saying at the end of every sentence is probably not the best way to present yourself. Shows confusion. But it's also a great way to say things like, Dayton, Ohio is a great place to live, and I can really see myself and my family here. When I come here, where's a great place for me to live? It's showing that you've already, it's a word game, and you're showing that, hey, I'm already here. You've already taken me. I've already put myself here. So I'm just letting you give me the answers. And that's just a little bit of verbal judo. It's a great book. It's a little bit of wordplay. It's fun. So the interview, again, everybody is on the same playing field. First thing, get a nice pair of clothes, clean, ironed, your shoes immaculate. Don't wear crazy socks unless they're something like you can talk about. Please don't wear any socks, like don't come without socks. Don't come with sports socks like Nike socks and dress shoes. I've seen everything. So present yourself well, and that's the first appearance. Okay. When you come to the interview, you'd be so surprised how many people don't know the answer to why orthopedics. And that's all I want to know is, why are you doing this process? Because it can really suck sometimes. It can really, like, residency is very, very draining. And sometimes you wake up in the morning, you're like, why am I doing this? And you have to figure out why you're doing this every day. So really, really question yourself so that you're founded in your answer. When you're talking in the interview, make sure that you pause. Do not just blurt out answers. Be calm, take a breath, and answer the question. Do not just start blurting out and saying, and you want to be confident in your answer, but you're going to get asked things that you didn't plan for. And it's okay to take a second. Don't let your heart start racing. Just take a second, think about it. And if it doesn't come to you, say, let me think about that. Any other questions? Let me think about that for a second. That's a really great question. Could we come back to that one? And you'll give me some more time to think about it. That shows intention. It shows that you're really trying to be intentional in your answers. And we appreciate that. So just remember that. We can go on and on about the interview process, but I think this is, above all things else, we've had, at Grandview, we routinely take people that have rotated. And I think that's going to become more and more of a very prevalent, who rotated with you. This year it's made us really question, things like people that haven't rotated, because we've had some great interviewees that just had great interviews. We're like, wow, like they did such a good job presenting themselves. This could really, really set you, if you did not do well on your rotation and you come in and just kill the interview, this could take you from a bottom, like everybody didn't even think about you, and then everybody's calling you, hey, that was amazing, you're number one, oh my gosh. So really, really, really put a lot of effort into the interview. Sit down with your family. There's a simple questions like, why orthopedics? Why do you want to come to this program? Sit down, research the programs, ask questions at the programs. I have, again, if you go to that link, you'll see some of the questions I asked at my fellowship interviews. But if you just sit there and you say, I have no questions, it just shows like, well, why are you here then if you have no questions? And I know that some of the programs like ours, we do like a round robin where there's like 10 interview stations. And by the end, the 10th one, it's okay to be like, I think I've had everything answered. Like I've asked every single question. I'm not going to re-ask something. But, just be intentional on like why you're asking a question, but you should be asking questions throughout the interview. It's really important. And then there's the negotiation process. Be objective on what you're trying to accomplish. Why you are wanting to go into that program, residency program, what that program is looking for in its residents. That's absolutely a question. What has your program historically found to be the most successful resident? It's a great question. And they'll tell you. You are your own advocate. So if you don't know yourself, how is someone else going to know you? So you have to memorize your application. If I start asking, if you did like a gene scaffold assay back in high school that you wanted to put on your application, you damn better know about that research. Because if I ask you about it, I want to know about it. And you can't just sit there and be like, oh, it was a good experience. I want to know more about it. So, and that's why I'm asking. I'm trying to see if you know your own life. And then be sure to always hook, if it wasn't a very strong part of your application, hook it to something stronger in your application. So if, let's say, maybe you had zero research and zero volunteer experiences per se. Well, I didn't have a lot of volunteer research, which again is not always required. But as you can see, I did this that I felt really passionate about, and I wanted to dedicate my time to it. And as you can see, I was very passionate about it. For me, I find that I can spread myself thin, so I've dedicated my time to school, and I find that that is the best way for me to succeed. It shows that you know who you are and you're being confident in your answer and why you didn't do something. It's, again, it goes back to verbal judo and to the whole negotiation portion of getting a spot that you want. And then developing rapport. You know, whenever we have our interviews, we don't just have attending and residents, we have the staff there too. We have people from the community, regular patients who just come in and we want to see what they think about you, and we have them interview you, because you have to develop rapport. If you walk straight into the room and sit in the seat and then you go, I'm here, and you don't introduce yourself and ask someone like, who are you? I've never met you before, and you're not developing that rapport early on in the interview process, it makes, you've already started off on a bad foot. So actively listen to the questions. Don't be afraid to ask them something, and then you guys start to build a rapport, and then it's a dialogue after that. Whenever I was in my interviews, I tried to get away from the interview portion of it as much as possible, and I wanted to get into just having a conversation, because that's where I succeed. If you're just sitting there asking me about my application, I start to get really nervous. And so I wanted to move away from that and be like, oh, let's put that aside. Oh, so, you know, what makes you happy? Like, what, you know, like that's how you really, really build rapport. And people, even if you answer none of their questions, at the end, whenever you leave the room, they'll be like, oh my God, that was so much fun. Like, I really enjoyed that person. Their energy was unreal. Like, I want them to come back into the room. So that's what you want in the interview process. And then again, like we talked about, be thoughtful in your answers, take a breath, breathe, speak slowly and clearly. You don't want to be rambling, and it's okay to say, I don't know, you know, I don't know, and I will find out for you, or something like that. It's okay. Above all else, be yourself. You have earned that spot. Be confident in yourself. Don't question why you're there. You have earned that spot. You went through the process of chopping wood, carrying water, reap the benefits of that interview. Enjoy the process of being there, and be yourself above all else. Then you have to think about the match. I remember the day that I matched, I took the day off because I knew that the match results were coming out. They were supposed to come out at noon, but they came out at 6 a.m. instead. And I was screaming in my room because I was super excited I got into residency. Of course, they don't let you know where, but they tell you that you got into residency. And it's the best feeling in the world. And it's changed my life forever. But what happens when you don't get in? All right, and we'll talk about that in a second. I want to talk about your rank list. For your rank list, do not get strategic. This process is set up for you and your success. They have literally have an algorithm that is built around you, the applicant, and getting you into the spot that you want to go to. So do not think about, you know, I went to that interview and that one was a lot better than the other interview, so I'm going to put that one first. Oh, I got a phone call from this person, but I didn't get one from over there, so I'm going to put them last, even though I like their Like, I want you to pick the place you want to be. Nothing is worse than going to a residency that you don't want to go to. If you do not want to be there, don't go there. Period. I had 2 places I didn't rank because I just didn't see myself there. And so I'm not saying to do that. That can be risky, but it worked out for me. But I'm saying that be intentional on your rank list and know why you're putting someone number 1, number 2, number 3, wherever. If you have one, who cares? That is the only one. You earn that one. And don't be afraid to send an email and say, I want to thank you for interviewing me. I felt like our time was well worth it, and I learned a lot about your program, and I'd be, you know, honored to come there and be trained by you. You know, that shows, you know, that you're conscious of the stakes that are at hand, and that you're wanting to be there, but it doesn't show that you're desperate, which is also a thing. So think about that. Again, matching is great, but then I want to talk about the unmatched. So this is becoming more and more. And again, this goes back to why you're doing this. One of the most important questions that I ask during the interview is, like, what is your backup plan if you don't match? I do not want to hear that you don't have a plan. I want to hear that you've thought about this, that it's a realistic possibility, and where you're going to go after that. Are you going to SOAP? Are you going to do an extra year of medical school? Are you just going to take a year to travel? What are you going to do? And you have to have a ready to go plan. My plan was to go into family medicine. That was my plan. I love people. I had a family medicine doctor position set up for me already in San Antonio at a group. And I knew that it was 3 years, I could get through it, and I was ready to do family medicine. And I let people know that, because I said I wanted to be a doctor first, and I didn't care the way I got there. I just wanted to help people. And that was my passion. You have to figure out what's best for you. And there's other options other than SOAPing. Really, really consider, can you do another specialty? You know, you didn't go to if you went to medical school to be an orthopedic surgeon, there's a problem there. Okay. You have to identify that there's a problem there, because medical school sucks, residency sucks even more, and then getting a job sucks, and then the healthcare system sucks. So if you went in to be an orthopedic surgeon, there's a problem. You have to really evaluate why you're being a doctor in the first place. If you tell me that you wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, I would just call bullshit on you. I would say, no, I don't believe that, because you would have been great at anything you did, because you are in med school. You are the top 1% that got in. Even if you're an osteopath, you are privileged to be in the site that you are, but you earned it. So have confidence that you are being a physician for a reason and why you're there. SOAP to me is not a great option. Okay. I'm not saying not to do it, but do not SOAP with the sole intent that you're going to reapply the next year. Okay. If you SOAP and you get into a transitional year, think about that for a second. That's a job. Someone's paying you to do a job, to clock in and clock out. Do you think that job wants you to go anywhere else? Do you think that job is going to allow you to have the time to go rotate other places? So what is going to change for you in a year that's not going to have been really good for you the year prior? I've already told you that every year it gets more and more competitive. And the fact that you didn't match makes you less competitive. So think really, really, strategically on whether or not you're going to SOAP. I'm not saying not to do it, but I'm saying that talk to the programs, ask them, do you give me time? I want to do orthopedics. Are you going to give me time to rotate? Do you have an associated orthopedic program? Can I get time to do like, those are all very important questions. If you just match, I've had people match into general surgery, and then they're like, they're a general surgeon resident for an intern, and they basically reapply because they had no time. They were doing scut work for an entire year, and then they just reapply. And we're like, what did you change last year? Nothing. I just did a transitional year. Okay, cool. That doesn't show any growth there. So the one thing that you want to do is get feedback on why you didn't match. Don't be afraid to reach out to programs and ask them specifically, like, hey, what didn't you like about me as an applicant? Is there anything I could have changed? What can I do better? I felt like, especially your number 1, number 2, number 3, you want to ask them, like, what can I have done better to make me more competitive for next year? One of the things that we opened up this year is a research fellowship. So if you go to OrthoGate and you look up research fellowships, these are opportunities for you to be at some of the top institutions in the world doing orthopedic research. And it's a great opportunity for you to get plugged in, meet new people, get new letters of rec, just revamp your whole application. If you have a lot of research and you go do a research fellowship, is that going to change much for you? No, you're not doing it for research. You're doing it to meet new people, to get someone to make a phone call for you. And so that's ultimately what you're doing, you're networking for a year. So when people ask you about your research fellowship, be honest with them. When you go to the interview the following year, it was a research fellowship, but really it was my opportunity to network, and that's how I'm here today. That's how you plug yourself in to getting a successful residency spot the following year. But I think it's a great option personally, because like our research fellow this year, Maddie Mesmer, she got opportunities. We made phone calls for her to go rotate at other places. We were like, hey, get out of here. You can be remote. There's nowhere you need to be. We'll call you when we have research that you need to do. And then she set up her own schedule, and that is absolutely not how every research fellowship is, but that's where you get to interview with them and ask them what requirements they have. They know that you're not going to stay there to do a research fellowship. They know that you're trying to do an orthopedic residency. That's why you're there. So they're going to try to get you into one. So I think it's a great option. The other option is to extend your medical school, go into your administration and tell them that you want to do another year. And you're not going to do classes, but you can be an anatomy TA, and they can pay you to do that. A lot of research fellowships and anatomy TAs are unpaid positions. So how are you going to make money that year? You can delay your student loans, but you're going to have to take a loan out for the year. Research fellowships aren't the most lucrative if they do pay. So again, it's going to be a hit. But again, this goes back to now you're having to chop wood and carry water again. You're going to have to start all over, and that's okay. But you have to ask yourself, why are you doing it? Because again, you became a physician because you wanted to help people. Figure out why you want to do orthopedics, and it'll all be clear to you. So with that, I've left the White Coat Coaching promo code here. And so first two people can absolutely get after that. I've left this tiny URL, again, is for my all the documents for this, some CV stuff, and then there's my link for social media, residency, things like that. And there's my phone number, my email. Please, I have a family. I have lots of responsibilities. If you're going to reach out, just have specific questions. I'm happy to help with things, but reading over your entire application and revising it, probably not the best utilization of my time, especially when there's services out there for you. But if you need advice, I'm here for you. I've been there, done that. I'm happy to help. Just ask. So with that, I'll leave the floor open with any questions that you guys may have. I'm happy, and we can be candid as you want. Can we turn off the recording? Let's just turn off the recording. And